Anyway, thanks very much for the update on the accessible natural green space standard. Really good to see it being used, and for Data Map Wales to have the information there for everyone to access. I was interested actually in whether you've done an analysis of the different urban areas of Wales to sort of give some flavour of, say, how Wrexham is now doing, or how Cardiff is generally doing in terms of accessible natural green space. I think certainly when we did the analysis for Wrexham, the hardest thing was retrofitting green space within a heavily urbanised area, and whether you've got any examples of how that has now been done in Wales.
Wow. Okay, so how have things happened since the original round of analyses? And the question is, the answer is we don't know. So the old Countryside Council for Wales gave a grant. I think it's something in the region of £20,000 to every local authority to map their accessible natural green space, and every local authority did that in greater or lesser detail, and they all interpreted the standards within the green space, or the advice within the Greenspace Toolkit, as to what was accessible and natural in different ways. So in Carmarthenshire, they used a very strict criteria for naturalness, for natural feeling, because most of their towns were small, and people expected different things of green spaces than they did in the middle of places like Newport or Cardiff. So it's very difficult to get a direct comparison between local authorities from the original data. And since then, local authorities have mapped slightly different things for things like green infrastructure assessments. But no local authority, to my knowledge, has gone back and updated their green space, accessible natural green space assessment. I've been trying to encourage them to do that. There is a protocol for local authorities to update their data set, and they don't even need to use geographic information systems to do that. They can simply send in a line on an Excel spreadsheet to tell us how they want their bit of the data set updated. So simple answer is no, we don't know how things have changed. Hopefully we will, as technology like aerial photography and GIS gets easier to use.
Thanks for that, Pete. So I just wonder whether, I mean, I know NLW was involved with Greener Grangetown, which I suppose could be seen as an opportunity where you develop SUDs within an urban streetscape. Mm-hmm. How does something like that? How would you assess something like that with the accessible natural green space standard?
So I'm hoping that everybody's watched the presentation about the Greener Grangetown project and about SUDs. But these are micro green spaces, like rain gardens, connected street tree planters. So those are the kinds of interventions that you'd put in if you discovered that you were highly deficient in access to natural green space at the local level, and you didn't have access to build a new nature park or to create new green spaces. Then you would use things like rain gardens, green roofs, smaller green roofs, green walls, like that ivy-covered wall in Copenhagen that I showed as part of the presentation. You'd use those kinds of things to ameliorate the deficiency of green space, but you couldn't actually say we have removed that deficiency of access to natural green space. But that's why the standards are written up as aspirational standards, and that's why they're set out as such in Technical Advice Note 16, and that's why local authorities won't get penalised for failure to meet the standards, but questions will get asked as to why haven't they done anything to ameliorate the lack of green space by putting in street trees, putting in green walls, putting in rain gardens, disconnecting yet more surface water from the combined sewer by putting in sustainable drainage systems. So it looks like Richard got his microphone back. Oh no, there he is. He's still there. So I don't know if that answered your question, Richard.
Yes, thanks, Pete. Yeah, very useful. Thank you.
Lovely. Well, if anybody else has got any further questions for me, now would be a really good opportunity to ask them. But you will need to unmute yourself before you can do that. If you're having trouble there, put the question in the chat. Now, Jane, would you like to unmute yourself if you can to ask your question?
Hi, Pete. Thanks. That was really. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can. Thank you very much.
Lovely.
Feel free to turn on your video if you wish as well.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I just Hi there. Hi. Nice to meet everybody. Just a very practical question, because when you go, thanks, that was really interesting to look at how you can identify green spaces, you know, and natural green spaces for access. Really very useful toolkit. Thanks. But my practical question was, when you go onto the Data Map Wales, you then need your government gateway ID. Is that something you set up through work? Because obviously everyone has a personal gateway ID. That's it, really. That's fine.
I've never tried using my own personal government gateway ID to get onto Data Map Wales, because I think the government gateway ID is connected to your email address. I changed emails in the middle of setting up my personal government gateway ID, and mine has never worked personally. But my professional one with my Natural Resources Wales ID works perfectly every time. So it's
okay to have two. That's what I suppose I was saying, really. That's, yeah.
I don't know whether it's okay to have two, because I've only got one, which is my professional one.
I'll speak to my colleagues and see what they say, Pete. That's lovely. Thanks.
Right. Okay. And good luck with getting access.
Thank you.
So if anybody's got any further questions, please unmute yourself and ask them now. And if you find you're struggling to unmute yourself, put your question in the chat.
Hi everyone. I am Sana. I'm a PhD student in Aberystwyth University, and we are currently working on a same project, planning of urban green infrastructures with a multi-species justice consideration. I wanted to know that whether there is any part in Green Infrastructure Toolkit, that, you know, considered the term of multi-species justice, or any part of it related to multi-species justice consideration in urban green infrastructure in Wales.
That's a really good question, and the answer is, when we were developing the toolkit, it was a big leap of faith to actually get an idea of environmental justice for Homo sapiens, let alone looking at justice for a multitude of species. The toolkit comes with quite a big backstory, and there was a lot of research done by Trista Roeder and Tony Kendall from Reading University, who did a very large systematic review about all the data that we had on, you know, the various different beneficial effects of green space for human beings. So they looked at you know, the Kaplan's nature restoration theory. They went through all the literature with a fine-tooth comb, and when that advice was then distilled down into the original set of access to natural green space standards before even the toolkit was produced, the standards were developed on the basis that that idea of a 300-meter radius around a green space being important, it turned out that it wasn't just good for accessibility, but it also, for example, reduced your risk of dying within a heat wave. If you were within 300 meters of a decent bit of green space, it was still early days, but yeah, that we were getting information on things like particulate air pollution, and again, having functional green space within a 300-meter radius seemed to help there. And the advice that we had about providing larger bits of green space, it was because those were diverse for many species of plant and animal, and that provided many more points of interest for human beings to go for. So I think practically, although we didn't build into the toolkit the idea of multi-species justice, it's actually, if you provide green space to the accessible natural green space standards, I'd be willing to bet that you would provide equitable habitats for a great many species. I don't know if that will help you at all in your research there, Saman, but I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Well, one of the aims and goals, of our research project, it's part of we are working as a team of a mosque project in Finland, and we want to create or enhance green infrastructures, urban green places or blue spaces, and not only are they beneficial for human, but also for other species. So we have to turn on its heads to see what nature wants from the human. Can it be adapted? Can it be, I don't know, how we want to understand what nature wants from us, what other species want from human, to live in such habitats. So we are not only going to consider our own perspective on this matter, we are going to turn on its head and see what nature wants from us. So we want to identify the gap in policies, especially in Wales and particularly in Cardiff. Cardiff is our case study. We want to ask residents of Cardiff in a district, a study area in Cardiff, and see where they do want to go. Based on the policy that you mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, everyone should live near within a 300 meter of their home to access to a green space. So we want to know to identify these hotspots and cold stops and the gap between these, and to enhance or create a green corridor to connect these hotspots through these gaps. But without considering the multi-species justice, that is our main goal, that would be a little difficult. So I wanted to know whether there is a specific policy, not only in Green Toolkit, but in other, I don't know, planning practices, policies regarding multi-species justice. I'm not sure whether I was clear enough for that.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
As far as I'm aware, there are certainly in Wales, there are no policies no policies developed yet for that kind of thing, but we are looking at things like resilient ecological networks in urban areas, which will hopefully go some way towards creating a policy framework for biodiversity to move freely within urban areas. So I think that's something that you could look to in future, and that kind of work on resilient ecological networks should sit alongside the accessible natural green space toolkit, and you should be able to overlay them and go, well, that area there is an important core site for both people and a whole bunch of flora and fauna. So we need to take strenuous measures to protect that kind of that site. And in practical terms, in Cardiff, that would probably be some of the river valleys, which have been protected since the first ever nature conservation strategy for the city back in the 1980s, I think it was. So you should be able to set your work, overlay your work with the accessible natural green space toolkit, and create another data set which will provide even stronger rationale for maintaining and improving urban green spaces. And I'm particularly interested to find out how things like sustainable drainage systems can act as stepping stones within resilient ecological networks to enable more of the flora and fauna to travel within and through urban areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really interesting question, and I really look forward to seeing the results of your research.